Welcome to our posts. Today we will see stories of am I the a-hole? Am I the a-hole for saying, just leave, at my cookout? My sister Nicole, 34, brought her new boyfriend, Steve, to our family cookout yesterday. It's for about 30 people. For the sides, everyone brought in sides. My sister brought one bag of store-brand potato chips, and Steve helped himself to beer right away before being introduced to everyone. We are having hamburgers and hot dogs and just hanging out with the family. It's nothing fancy. Steve asks, "Is this it?" when the first plate of hot dogs is done and waiting on the round of hamburgers. My wife says there will be hamburgers soon, and Steve tells my wife and sister about his family and how they have barbecue chicken, steak, shrimp, and many options. I picked up the plate of hot dogs and told Steve he could leave and go to his family barbecue instead. He just looked at me and drank his beer, and I told him and my sister to go since this wasn't good enough for Steve. I gave my sister store-brand photo chips back and told her to get out. My sister and Steve left, and the cookout was fine after that. My mom heard about me kicking them out and was mad at me and told me to apologize to my sister. Maybe there was a misunderstanding, but Steve was just an a-hole commenting like that at someone's house and the first time you meet their family. My wife thinks I was right because Steve acted like that in her home, and insulting the host is a good reason to be kicked out. Others are split about 50-50 when they heard about what happened. Top comments. Not the a-hole. Why would you put up with this nonsense at your own home? I don't understand anyone who thinks you went too far. Do they think this idiot would have stopped at just one comment? Hell, no. As host, you ensured your other 30 guests wouldn't be subjected to entitled, passive-aggressive crap. Not the a-hole. They brought a bag of chips, drank beer they didn't provide, and thought you were cheap. Rude, entitled, and deserved the treatment they received. Anyone who thinks you were wrong can invite them to their next party. Not the a-hole. If you want food like steak, shrimp and chicken at a cookout funded by someone else, you better prepare it and bring it to cook on the grill yourself. Not the a-hole. If they wanted it to be more than that, maybe they should have brought more than a bag of chips. Next story. Am I the a-hole for punishing my family by no longer doing birthdays, holidays, vacations because my dad screwed me and my wife over? When my wife and I were talking about getting married, my dad said that he would give us a down payment for a home. We were thrilled and kept that in mind. We would be able to afford a good starter home with his help, and we scrimped and saved to add to it. Except apparently he meant a sum of money good for a down payment for a house near us, where the cost of living is low. He did not ever mean a down payment for a home in Colorado, where my wife and I have lived since we were in college. He said he thought I would be smart enough to realize that we'd need to move somewhere with a lower COL than Colorado. He keeps saying, move to a cheaper city. Our lives are here. Our friends, our jobs, our hobbies. You can't exactly leave your house and be up on top of a 14,000-foot peak in 6 hours where my family is. I told him that we had never talked about moving back there, and we never would. That we would rather be stuck renting for a while longer than be stuck somewhere we didn't want to be, and that a move to a cheaper city wouldn't work for us. He said, so be it, and gave us the amount, and that was that. I expressed gratitude and thanked him for the money. It is still towards the goal. Well, because of this shift in our finances, we have had to make a lot of changes to save up the rest of the money. We have had to cut out vacations, birthday gifts, holidays, etc. We won't be traveling home for a few years. At our current rate, we should have an okay down payment by the end of next year, 2025. My dad confronted us about this because we won't come for a summer break trip and told me that I was being a selfish, entitled brat because I hadn't gotten my way. That I was essentially punishing the rest of the family because we assumed what his gift would be. I told him that I was grateful for the amount he gave us, but that it means we do need to buckle down and save every penny if we want to be able to afford a house anytime soon. Even townhouses around us are easily over $400K, and that's for the sketchy ones. But is my dad right? Am I the a-hole? Edit to add FAQ. There was no amount formally discussed. He said, a down payment, and that was that. For my siblings, he paid for college. He paid cash in full for my sister's house, it was $317,000. He did not pay for my college. They are invited to come here anytime, but believe it should be me to go there because I am the one who moved. No, we do not go out to eat, avocado toast, Starbucks, cable, etc. etc. Top comments. Info. Did he give you the amount he said he would? Because if he did, I fail to see how he screwed you over. Your dad screwed you and your wife by giving you money, but less than you had hoped for. If you can't afford to travel, that's one thing, but trying to portray this as your family screwing you over somehow, yikes. That's a definite you are the a-hole from me. You are the a-hole for framing it as your dad screwing you over. He offered you a down payment for a home. You assumed it would be a certain amount. It wasn't. But he still gave you a generous gift. And now you describe that generous gift as screwing you over. Also, while you're under no obligation to go on family trips, to cut out any visits to them for a few years after your dad gave you this generous gift because it wasn't as much as you were expecting sends a message, whether you mean it to or not. Why don't you do some critical thinking and maybe ask them to come visit you this time? I don't know, you guys are both a holes in this situation. Y'all need to communicate better and find a resolution. OP replies. We have told them that since we can't come out there and they have plenty of disposable income, they are welcome to come out here. My mom would love to come see us, and we'd be happy to have her. My dad is being stubborn and saying that they're the parents, so we need to go see them. I live on the West Coast and my family is on the East Coast. It is so expensive now to travel. People always expect you to go to them because you're an a-hole for leaving, but it's really not fair. If you want to save for a house, I get not wanting to visit. They can always visit you or offer to help pay travel expenses if they really want to see you. He gave you money, accepting that you would be putting it toward a house where you live now rather than near him. And you respond by, essentially, cutting him out of your life and tightening your belt? You are the a-hole. OP replies. Oh, no, he 100% assumed that when the amount he was giving us wasn't enough for a down payment in CO, we would somehow change our minds and buy a home there instead. He still has not accepted that we aren't moving back and brings it up in every single conversation. Next story. Am I the a-hole for repeatedly calling someone stupid after they accused me of lying about my children's ethnicity? My husband is Dominican and I'm Irish. Our kids look like him in terms of facial features, but they inherited my pale skin. Our son has his father's dark hair, but my daughter's is borderline dark blonde. Genes are weird, what are you gonna do? Both my kids and myself have my husband's last name, which is a popular Dominican last name. There have been times we get looks when people hear our last name and my husband isn't around. But it's never been too bad and usually, I shrug it off. Due to my husband's work schedule, he's rarely at school events. So, most people just know me. There's another little girl in my daughter's class with the same last name as us. Her mom also volunteers often. When we met, she flat out said, "You're not Dominican." I said, "No. My husband and kids are." She said, "But your last name is X." I said, "Yeah, because it's my husband's." She pointed out how pale they are. I just said genes are weird. But almost every time we see each other, she brings it up somehow. Making comments about how pale the kids are. Finding it weird they don't know Spanish, my husband didn't learn growing up so they don't know it either. I just let it roll off because while it's weird, I'm not about to get into a competition. The teacher asked the kids to make collages about their cultures. My daughters had stuff related to being a Dominican and stuff related to being Irish. They had a whole culture day where parents were invited. The mom of the other little girls saw my daughter's collage and rolled her eyes, thankfully not in front of my daughter. There were no other kids around at the time as they were getting food. It was just parents looking at the collages. I asked what her problem is. She said I'm not a real Dominican. I said I never claimed to be. She said my kids aren't either and that my husband is probably only a little Dominican and we're claiming a culture that's not ours. I was dumbfounded. All I could ask was, "Are you stupid?" She said there was no need to be defensive. Finally, I had enough, pulled out my phone and showed her pictures of myself with my husband and the kids. She stared at it for a moment and mumbled an apology. I said, "Yeah, Maybe research how genes work so you don't make yourself look stupid in front of a bunch of third graders." She got teary-eyed and walked away. I got the stink eye from some other parents which I ignored. When I told my husband later, he said calling her stupid repeatedly, when she already apologized, was an a-hole move. Am I the a-hole? Top comments. I mean, it sounds like she'd been harassing you for a while over this and maybe more than a little prejudice. Gatekeeping an entire culture. What if your husband didn't look Dominican enough for her? There comes a point where you stop being nice. Maybe you did take it a bit far, but repeated snide remarks wear a person down until they snap. Not the a-hole because it feels justified. Genetics are super weird. Reminds me of a story I was listening to the other week about a family with only albino children, and the father blamed the mother for it, called her all sorts of awful names, had an affair, ran off with the mistress he knocked up. Who had an albino baby? Not the a-hole. Why would she be so pressed about someone else's culture, or culture they claim to be? She was rude and basically harassing you on more occasions than one. She wasn't entitled to an explanation, let alone having to show her a picture of your family for her to be convinced. I think you were more than patient with her and definitely not the a-hole. Hate to break it to her, but she isn't the only Dominican to walk this earth, and not all Dominicans are gonna look like what her mind accepts as one. Not the a-hole. There is a saying, insanity is doing the same thing over again and expecting a different result. You've been polite to this woman, who has been exceptionally rude to you, for a long time, and she has made it quite clear that she would not stop questioning your children's ethnicity. If you were going to get her to stop, you had to do something different. She brought this on herself by inserting herself into something that she had no reason to. Next story. Am I the a-hole for telling my parents we aren't giving them money and they need to humble themselves? Throw away to keep this separate from my normal account. I, 38F, and my husband, 41M, have been stressing over my parents. My parents are screwed as they took out of their pensions at 55 and have only about 100-130K each left. Their house has some equity, but not as much as you would think, as they have withdrawn from their equity line of credit several times. My dad has a 100K truck and a vintage Porsche, and my mom has a 7-seater when they are the only ones now. My dad is very prideful and refuses to take anyone's advice, so it was a shock when they came to me and asked for money. He has had a lot of health issues and told me he is going to be taking Social Security now. He is 68, and quitting his job. Which means they cannot afford their mortgage or car payments. They totally blindsided me. I had no idea how bad it was until now. Thinking back, I guess I should have known, as they buy so much unnecessary crap, but my parents always acted they were rich. I told them point blank I wasn't funding them until I could see all their accounts and assets, and this caused a huge fight, but they eventually relented. I went through what they have and they really don't need my help. They just need to downsize dramatically. My husband is a CPA, so he knows this stuff, and we went though and told what they needed to do. They need to sell all the vehicles and get a reliable sedan. They need to sell their 3,400 square feet home and buy into a single home with a basement suite or an apartment. I think the apartment is better, as my dad struggles to mow the lawn and hires someone now anyway. But my mom insists she needs land for a garden. After that, their SS payments would be enough and they would still have a small nest egg. This was met with them complaining that they would be living like prisoners. My parents were angry if they got a small single family they would need to rent out the basement. My dad insists the basement, which he has as a man cave, is necessary for life, and my mom refuses to downsize as she has a whole room full of clothes at their current home that can't fit in a smaller house. I got mad and told them they need to humble themselves since they are the ones asking for money. This resulted in them yelling how ungrateful I am over the phone until I hung up. I told them they have to do this because I'm not helping. They still have more assets than my husband and I, and we have a son to save college funds for. My parents have been trying to guilt me by saying they gave me great Christmas presents and college funds, so I owe them. I feel like that was a tiny proportion of their spending and it didn't put them in this position, but am I obligated to help support them when they can support themselves if they downside? Top comments. Not the a-hole. Poor planning on their part is not an emergency on your part. They can afford their lifestyle if they downsize, but they are choosing not to downsize. Instead, they want you to subsidize their lives. Don't. If they're strapped for cash, they can sell stuff. You are such a good daughter. If you had done that sort of audit and planning for me, I'd be singing your praises to everyone. You are awesome. Info: why wouldn't they just rent out a room or two in their current house? Downsizing doesn't work when the house you want to buy is similarly priced to the house you want to sell, especially if they want to stay in the same area. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, make sure like, comment, share and subscribe the channel our posts.